welcome to another car ride conversation video. I wanted to just cover a topic that came to mind, and that is, what is the significance of lawyering up? And does it always indicate someone's guilt? Contrary to what a lot of commenters may say or feel or think, lawyering up is actually, it's a smart move. And the prosecution, the DA, they're going to always say, law enforcement will always tell you, if you have nothing to hide, then why do you need a lawyer? That is the biggest manipulation of the process that they'll ever come up with, because they almost make you feel like by doing something to hold them accountable, you are essentially putting out there that you're guilty. Well, and that's not, it's just not always the case. But it begs the question of how differently the Watts case would have turned out had Ronnie Watts walked into that room and said, you need to stop talking, you need to get an attorney, and even if they don't let you walk out of here today, you do not say another word until you are speaking with your attorney. And what would that have meant for this case? What would it have ultimately forced law enforcement to do? And I think as parents, and this was a raw moment between Ronnie and Chris. Ronnie, I'm hesitant because I have different tracks with what was the thought process going in there. But Ronnie and Chris have this moment as a parent and a child, and it's almost like the natural instinct is, I need to know what happened. Son, tell me what happened. And oftentimes I've questioned whether or not Ronnie knew what was going on. But I feel like in that moment, we see a parent just kind of hit with something. Ronnie comes face to face with the realization that his son has committed a crime that goes beyond anything he would have ever thought would have transpired. And I say that because I do feel like there were conversations over the summer in North Carolina where they considered, if he tries to leave her, what would it look like? If she were to leave him, what would it look like? I do feel like Cindy and Ronnie probably had those conversations with Chris. Even Ronnie says it here in the police interview. He mentions Cindy told him, you're probably going to have to stick it out at least through the rest of the pregnancy before you file for divorce.
Well, they said, if you're pregnant, you might just have to tough it out, just have a baby and help out with that. But like I said, she said it was his idea. He said totally it was her idea on another child.
And then any
So they had already very much been talking about it, and you can keep your head in the sand all you want, but as a parent, I would hope that you're going to have these conversations with your grown adult children. If you know there's problems at home and you know there's a situation, that it could be volatile, you will have these conversations about how to protect yourself, how to make sure that you're safe about it. Ask any divorce attorney, and a divorce attorney will tell you that you leave when it's the least hostile moment, and that's usually when one of the others is at work or away. gosh, he doesn't look shocked. He doesn't look like it's, he clearly he was shocked, but it almost looked like he wasn't surprised. And that was bothersome to me. But is it bothersome because it's indicative of guilt of some sort? But again, exactly what is that guilt? And that kind of brings us full force back around to why is it important to have a defense attorney? And the truth is, at the end of the day, a good parent, one who has taught their son or daughter about accountability and ownership, I think that's what you see here in the whole concept of getting Chris to tell Ronnie what happened. Whereas a defense attorney is going to say, and let's let law enforcement work through this process, because that is in fact what it is. It is a process. So Ronnie going in and just really trying to come to terms or try to get some answers, I think he was asking the questions, but he wasn't prepared for the answer that was coming back. And especially with the girls, and I think for the majority of us, the girls are really the part that it's just, it absolutely is gut-wrenching, because I mean, who does that? Who takes their kids to a birthday party the day before, worries about the cake that they're eating for allergic reactions, and yet you turn around within hours and they're no longer with you? That's, there's so much to this case, but for the sake of this video, it's important that in this moment, if Ronnie had literally said to Chris, son, I'm here, I don't know what the hell's going on, you need an attorney, because he's already talked to them, he's already given them search, they could search the house, they could search his phone, search his truck, he's already turned over all of this stuff to them, which is far more than what he had to do. And as a parent walking in there, the one thing as a parent watching this body cam footage that I scream at every time is, tell him to get an attorney and stop talking. And I just feel that this case would have taken a completely different turn. The direction would have shifted. And I think, in my opinion, Mr. Kessinger knew that too. And that is precisely why we heard Mr. Kessinger interjecting so much with Nicole's questioning. Because if you listen to the investigator and you listen to Dwayne Kessinger, Daddy Kessinger was paying attention. He knew what was coming. He knew what they were trying to do. And had her father not been there, had Ronnie told Chris to lawyer up.
Yeah, I'm with you. We definitely need to accelerate the case, because the more it takes, the less sure that they are of situations. But on the other end, I think if you do just that only,
You tell me what you're willing to provide to me, and we'll write it
good
on.
enough?
I just want our text conversation, and then I guess our phone call records.
So I'm going to put.
So the time and date of the phone call records, and then our text message.
Could we get photos of him?
Huh?
Could we get photos of him?
Off of
Would
that?
you mind if we got his photos that he sent to you?
Oh, well, they'll be in that text message thing.
So all his photos were sent. There was no apps or anything else used
No,
that you guys were sending. It was
no.
all just text messages.
Yeah.
I firmly believe we would have more answers, and if in fact Kessinger is innocent and not obstruct or just, complicate the investigation. If she did not do anything illegal, then she would be completely cleared and there would be evidence to clear her. For the DA to say things such as, I don't know why she was searching them before she allegedly had met them. For the attorney to say she was mostly forthcoming, because that's what he said to begin with. So you can go back and listen to his actual words. Yes, in a recent podcast, he says, she didn't do anything, I just leave her alone and leave me alone. But that's not what you said in the beginning. In the original press conferences, it was, she was mostly forthcoming. She had deleted text messages which hindered the investigation. Those were his words, not anybody else's, his words. And when you have people questioning, well, how could you possibly say Chris should have gotten a defense attorney or he should have lawyered up? He should have lawyered up because it would have forced law enforcement to actually do and finish out the investigation. Had they finished out the investigation, which Baumhofer was not ready to be done with, Tammy Lee said they had just started. They weren't done. And they all felt like they hit a wall because there was so much more they had not dug into. What other searches, Google searches, searching Kessinger's apartment, searching her vehicle that she sold rather immediately. There would have been so many other things that would have come to light, that would have come together. How can you solve a puzzle when you don't have the majority of the pieces?
The girlfriend you referenced in court, can you give us a better idea of her role in the investigation, how forthcoming she was, and how she helped?
She originally came forward and spoke to investigators on her own volition. Prior to the time, unfortunately, that she came in and spoke with investigators, she had deleted all of the information off of her phone that had any connection between her and Chris Watts. That hampered the investigation. That hampered our ability to get that electronic digital connection between the two. She was interviewed on multiple occasions. I believe that for the most part she was forthcoming in the course of those investigations. We don't have any reason to believe that she had any prior knowledge or involvement in the death of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. I think that's the best way I can answer that. Yes, sir.
Let's talk about this very common analogy that's used in law. You hear it in court cases and the courtroom and all the time, and it talks about the puzzle pieces and putting the pieces together. Well, in this case, it's almost like they have this heaping pile of 2,000 pieces of puzzle scattered on the table, and they have propped the box up and they're looking at the images, or they're looking at the whole picture on the box. So they're looking at statistics, if you will. Statistically, what does this puzzle put together look like? It's what's on the box. Now, if the puzzle that you're putting together includes a lake with woods and scenery around it, guess what else it's going to include? It's going to include the reflection of the trees and everything in the water. So if you're looking at this heaping pile of puzzle pieces, you can look down and say, oh, there's a tree. It goes here with the green stuff. But if you're trying to mix the greens and the blues of that reflective piece, and you're trying to make it an actual tree with, up near the top of the puzzle with the sky, it's not going to fit. So you very well can have this idea of what you think something is, and you've got this heaping pile of pieces, and because you have several of them put together where an image is starting to form, which in my opinion is when you look at the finances, when you look at the affair, when you look at Shanae's personality, Chris, we start putting all these things together. The pieces are coming together. But the parts of that puzzle that never even got turned over, they were only working on the perimeter. You know, you typically put the perimeter together and then you can finish in on all the rest of the pieces. They never even touched the pieces with Kessinger. And in my opinion, when we're talking about the importance and the need for Chris Watts to have lawyered up so that the process could have worked, this investigation needed more time. And again, Mr. Kessinger knew the more time that they spent on this, they were going to dig further. And if they dug further, they were coming after his daughter. In this situation, we have two parents. More specifically, we have two fathers. And the difference is, what does their relationship, like, what is their genuine relationship? And when we look at Ronnie, he goes in with Chris. Again, he's wanting to know what happened. And I think in his mind, he was thinking something along the lines of they blew up and got into it and something happened. I don't think the kids part of it even dawned on him. But he was going in more so wanting answers. And Mr. Kessinger goes in more so, having done this before, he goes in understanding that if they've got anything on her, they're going to have to work for it. He was not going to just hand his daughter over and that be that. And so he really acted. Imagine if the parents were switched. Imagine if Kessinger's father, Dwayne, walked in there with Chris. And what would that conversation have looked like? I'm pretty positive it would have been, be quiet, we're going to get an attorney. Because he knew and he understood the process. And so I'll leave you with this. There are so many things that we can talk about, so many topics, but one of the manipulative tactics that I wish would leave law enforcement and true crime altogether is the assumption that when someone hires an attorney, then they must be guilty. Because truth be told, if law enforcement is doing what they are supposed to be doing and they genuinely are going by the book and working a case, they're going to be able to prove it. So even if Chris Watts had lawyered up, they still would have got him. But would they have gotten someone else as well? And all these years later, I really believe that's why we continue to have cycles where people are just enthralled with this case and having questions and why things have not died down, and it just keeps coming back. And why has Nicole Kessinger not been able to just be herself? She can't just come out and just be herself. Why does she feel the need to go and change her name? If she's innocent. And, I mean, so let's just finish with this, okay? Consider Kessinger's innocence. Isn't it a complete miscarriage of justice for Nicole Kessinger to have literally had to essentially go into hiding because law enforcement did not do a thorough enough job to where there's not people questioning her involvement? I mean, if they've cleared her, what was it that cleared her? What was her alibi? Why did she ping off at that tower that morning? What was the explanation for all of this? And so it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's either law enforcement did a great job, then she shouldn't have to be hiding, or shows and true crime podcasts, etc., are able to still ask some of these complicated questions and no one's even heard of it. You know, they want to be argumentative or say that didn't happen or say, you know, they know. Well, then how do you know? And so I think it just goes without saying that there's a process for a reason. There is a legal process for a reason. And yes, it makes for an easy day when someone you suspect of a crime confesses and says, sure, I did everything. But in a crime as horrendous as this one, is it really enough for someone to just say, well, I did it? And everything that they say does not match up with the evidence. What they say is just regurgitated conversations that have been had throughout the investigative process. It does not match the evidence. How, as an investigator, law enforcement, DA, how can you just be accepting and okay with that? And how dare you go to the family giving them premature information that is not backed up by facts, and then having to go back months later and say, oh, hey, it's way worse than we thought it was. And by the time that happens, you've already taken the last little bit of power that this family had, which would have been to pursue the death penalty. And I understand Colorado was never going to put Chris Watts to death, but that's a decision that family deserved to have. All of the evidence, all of the information, they deserve to have a very well-informed approach in order to make that decision. And when you take that from them, how do you sleep at night? That would wreck me. And I truly, genuinely question if that's exactly what happened to Detective Baumhofer. Was he knew there was more to it. And he didn't agree. He said it himself. He didn't agree with how it was being handled and processed. And yet, he left the career that he loved shortly after this case. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll try to add in some little things with sound bites so that you can hear what parts of the interviews I'm talking about. But keep in mind, guys, as you're listening or you're following along with true crime cases, try not to always jump on the bandwagon that if someone posts a video, then, oh, and they're like, oh, they're guilty, or oh, they didn't do it. Make sure you're taking the time to remain objective, look at the facts, and ask questions. And especially, you gotta put into perspective, everyone has to be accountable. The person committing the act needs to be held accountable. The law enforcement needs to be held accountable to do their job. The DA needs to be held accountable so that it remains fair. And the justice system only works if we're all accountable for our own actions. So until next time, thank you for this comment.